Elena Vasquez stood at the entrance of the grand hall, and for a moment, she could barely breathe. For 3 long years, she had dreamed of this exact moment. The massive chamber stretched out before her like nothing she had ever seen on Earth. It looked like someone had built a cathedral out of pure light and floating crystals. The ceiling seemed to go up forever, and the walls shimmered with colors that didn't even have names in human language. She took a slow step forward, her boots clicking softly on the strange floor that felt solid but looked like trapped starlight. All around her, hundreds of different alien species moved through the space. Some of them looked almost human, walking on 2 legs with 2 arms and a head. But others were completely beyond anything she could have imagined. There were creatures that floated in the air without wings, their bodies made of something that looked like liquid metal. Some aliens walked on 6 legs, others on none at all. A few didn't even have solid bodies. They existed as clouds of glowing gas, contained inside elegant frameworks that sparkled as they moved. Elena adjusted the collar of her formal Earth delegation uniform. The dark blue fabric with golden trim felt stiff and uncomfortable, but she wore it with pride. This was history happening right now. Earth was finally here, finally accepted into the vast community of intelligent species that lived across the galaxy. It had taken decades of proving themselves to get to this point. Decades of showing the galaxy that humans were more than just primitive fighters who only knew how to make war. Now, humanity finally had a seat at the table with all these ancient civilizations. She smiled politely at a reptilian ambassador who passed by. The creature's skin was covered in beautiful green and silver scales that caught the light. It nodded back at her, and a small device attached to its throat chirped out a friendly greeting in perfect English. Elena felt a surge of excitement. This was real. This was actually happening. Dr. James Chun suddenly appeared beside her, moving so quickly through the crowd that he nearly bumped into her. His eyes were wide with excitement, like a kid seeing snow for the first time. Chun was the head of Earth's Science Division, and he had been studying alien cultures for years, preparing for this moment. "Have you seen the Valkyrie yet?" he asked, barely able to contain his enthusiasm. "They're here. They're actually here." Elena followed his gaze across the massive hall. There, standing near the far wall, was a group of beings that made every other species in the room look young by comparison. The Valkyrie were tall and impossibly thin, like they were stretched out by time itself. Their skin was the strangest thing Elena had ever seen. It seemed to shift constantly between being solid matter and something that looked like living starlight. When they moved, they did so with slow, deliberate grace, as if every gesture had been practiced for centuries. The space around them felt different somehow, heavier, weighted down with age and wisdom. "They're magnificent," Elena breathed, unable to look away. The Valkyrie were more than just another alien species. They were legends. Stories about them had spread to the galaxy like ancient myths. Their civilization had existed for millions of years, back when most other species were still primitive creatures crawling out of their home planet's oceans. They had witnessed galaxies collide with their own eyes. They had seen stars being born in brilliant explosions of light and watched them die in silent darkness. They had watched countless civilizations rise up from nothing, reach for greatness, and then fall back down like waves crashing on a shore. "Let's introduce ourselves," Chin suggested eagerly. "Can you imagine what we could learn from them? They've seen things we can't even comprehend." They started making their way across the hall, weaving carefully between other delegations. A group of blue-skinned aliens were having an animated discussion about trade routes. A pair of mechanical beings stood perfectly still, communicating through flashes of light. Elena dodged around a floating jellyfish-like creature that smelled faintly of cinnamon. But as they got closer to the Valkyrie, Elena noticed something strange, something that made her stomach tighten with unease. The ancient beings were moving away from them. At first, she thought it might just be a coincidence. Maybe they were heading somewhere else. But then she saw it clearly, unmistakably. Every single time a human delegate moved in their direction, the Valkyrie shifted away, creating distance. It was like watching oil separate from water, natural and deliberate. Elena stopped walking. A cold, uncomfortable feeling settled in her stomach, like a stone. "Are they avoiding us?" Chin asked quietly, his earlier excitement fading into confusion. Before Elena could answer, she saw something that made the situation even stranger. A young Valkyrie diplomat, who clearly wasn't as practiced in the art of evasion as his elders, found himself accidentally cornered by a group of enthusiastic human delegates. They were asking rapid-fire questions about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, not noticing the aliens' discomfort. The young Valkyrie's translator device struggled to keep up with his words, and his luminescent skin started flickering in a way that looked like distress. "I apologize," the young Valkyrie said. His voice sounded like wind blowing through deep caves, hollow and ancient. "We do not approach those who harbor the walkers. Please excuse me." He slipped away before anyone could ask what he meant, moving with surprising speed despite his thin frame. The human delegation was left standing there in confused silence, looking at each other with questions written all over their faces. Elena's mind immediately started racing. Walkers. What did that mean? Who or what were the walkers? And why would the Valkyrie avoid humans because of them? She spent the rest of the summit carefully observing everything around her. She took mental notes, asked subtle questions to other species, and watched how different aliens interacted with the human delegation. Most species were friendly enough. Some were openly curious about Earth and its people. Others seemed cautious but polite. But none of them showed the same instinctive avoidance as the Valkyrie. It was personal. It was directed specifically at humans. That evening, back in her private quarters aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel, Elena sat alone with her data pad. The small device glowed softly in the dim light as she scrolled through files. She had requested every single piece of information they had on the Valkyrie, but there was frustratingly little available. The ancient species rarely shared their history or knowledge with anyone. They observed other civilizations from a distance, occasionally offered advice when asked, but they kept their secrets locked up tight. Then she found something interesting buried deep in a navigation file. When Earth had first made contact with the galactic community months ago, they had to submit their stellar coordinates as part of standard procedure. Every planet did this so ships could find them, but someone in the navigation department had flagged an unusual detail. In the Valkyrie star charts, some of which were thousands upon thousands of years old, Earth's sector of space was marked differently than all the surrounding areas. Elena zoomed in on the notation, her heart starting to beat faster. The symbol was colored amber, standing out against the blue and white of normal space. She ran it through the translation software, but the program could only give an approximate meaning. The words that came back were observed territory or possibly caution zone. The exact translation wasn't clear because the Valkyrie language was so old, but it was a date attached to the marking that made her breath catch in her throat. 50,000 years ago, the Valkyrie had marked Earth's region of space as special 50,000 years ago, long before human civilization existed, long before humans had built cities or invented writing or even left Africa, back when humans were just small tribes of hunter-gatherers trying to survive. She immediately called Chun. He answered on the first ring, and she could tell from the video that he hadn't been sleeping either. "Look at this," she said, sharing her screen with him. "They marked our sector as special 50,000 years ago." Chun stared at the image on his own screen, his face going pale in the blue light from the display. "That doesn't make sense," he said slowly. "We weren't anything 50,000 years ago. Just small tribes wandering around, hunting and gathering. Nothing that would interest a civilization that spans galaxies. Unless they weren't interested in us," Elena said, the words coming out slowly as the terrible idea formed in her mind. What if they were interested in something else? Something that was already there on Earth, waiting. The next morning, Elena requested a formal audience with Elder Moraine, the head of the Valkyrie delegation. She fully expected to be refused. The Valkyrie rarely met with anyone privately, especially not with representatives from new species like humanity. But to her surprise, the ancient being agreed to meet her. The location was a private chamber, far away from the crowds and noise of the main summit. The room was surprisingly simple when Elena entered. Soft light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, filling the space with gentle glow. Elder Moraine stood near the far wall. His form looked more solid than the younger Valkyrie she had seen, as if age had somehow made him denser, more real, more present in the physical world. "You wish to know why we avoid your kind, Elder Moraine said before Elena could even speak. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Yes, Elena replied, keeping her voice steady despite her nervousness. And I want to know about the marking on your star charts. The amber zone around Earth. The elder was silent for what felt like forever. The light in the room seemed to dim slightly, as if even it was waiting for his answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of millions of years of memory. Some things walked into your cradle long ago, Ambassador Vasquez, he said. For the first time, Elena heard genuine fear in his voice. Fear from a being who had lived for eons. They chose your world when your species was still learning to make fire. We do not know why they chose you specifically. We only know that they never left. What things? Elena demanded, taking a step forward. What are you talking about? The walkers, Elder Moraine said simply. His luminescent skin flickered with distress. They wear your faces. They move among you, living in your cities, walking your streets. And you do not even know they are there. We will not approach a world that harbors them. We made that mistake once, long ago. We will not make it again. Before Elena could ask another question, before she could demand more answers, the elder turned and walked away. His form seemed to fade like morning mist dissolving in sunlight, and then he was simply gone. Elena stood alone in the empty chamber. Her mind was spinning with questions that had no answers. Her hands were shaking slightly. A growing certainty settled over her like a heavy blanket. Humanity's place in the galaxy was far more complicated than anyone had ever realized. Something was on Earth. Something had been there for 50,000 years. Something that wore human faces and walked among them. And now Elena had to figure out what that something was. 3 weeks had passed since Elena returned from the Galactic Convergence, and she hadn't had a proper night's sleep since. Her office in Geneva had been transformed into something that looked like a detective's investigation room from an old movie. Holographic displays floated in the air all around her, showing images of ancient ruins and archaeological sites from every corner of the planet. The blue light from the screens cast strange shadows on the walls as the sun set outside her window. Dr. Chin sat at the large conference table in the center of the room, his fingers moving rapidly across his tablet as he pulled up file after file. Empty coffee cups were scattered around him, evidence of the long hours they had both been putting in. They had spent every single day since the summit digging deep into Earth's past, searching for any evidence of whatever the Valkyrie feared so much, looking for proof of these mysterious walkers. I still think this is completely insane, Chin said, though his voice lacked any real conviction. He didn't sound like he believed his own words anymore. We're chasing shadows based on what might just be the superstitions of an alien species we barely understand. They're not superstitious, Elena countered, not looking up from her own screen. The Valkyrie are scientists. They've existed for millions of years. Chun, millions. They've developed technology we can't even begin to comprehend. If they're genuinely afraid of something, then we need to know what that something is. Elena had managed to acquire a small collection of Valkyrie historical records through a trade agreement. The price had been steep. She'd had to give up several valuable pieces of human art and recordings of classical music, things the Valkyrie found fascinating about human culture. But the information she received in return was worth every sacrifice. The records were just fragments, though, small pieces of a much larger puzzle that the Valkyrie had deliberately kept incomplete. They didn't want anyone knowing their full history. But even these fragments were deeply disturbing. One record spoke cryptically about something called the Watchers in the Third Arm, referring to the spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy where Earth was located. Another ancient document mentioned those who wear borrowed faces and walk among the young races. A third record, one that was older than all of human civilization, simply stated in cold, clinical language, "We do not return to the blue world. The witnesses remain." Witnesses, Elena muttered to herself, staring at the translated text. Watchers, walkers, they're all talking about the same thing, but they won't just tell us directly what it is. Chun pulled up a new holographic display that filled the air between them. "I've been looking at those archaeological sites you suggested we examine," he said. "Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Easter Island in the Pacific, Nanmadol in Micronesia, and about 40 other locations around the world. I thought I'd be looking for evidence of alien construction, strange materials or impossible architecture. But that's not what I found at all. What did you find? Elena asked, pushing her chair back to get a better view of his display. Observation points, Chin said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Elena's skin prickle. Look at this carefully. The hologram showed Göbekli Tepe, the mysterious Turkish site that was older than agriculture itself. It had been built more than 11,000 years ago, before humans even knew how to farm. Chin highlighted certain stones in the display, zooming in on their weathered surfaces. The detail was incredible. These particular stones show very unusual wear patterns, he explained, using his finger to trace the marks on the holographic surface. This isn't weathering from rain or wind or normal erosion. It's not from human touch either. It's like something stood in exactly the same spots for centuries, maybe even thousands of years, just standing there, watching. The wear is too precise, too localized to specific areas. He switched the display to show Easter Island, the remote Pacific location famous for its giant stone heads called Moai. Chin highlighted several positions around the massive statues. Same thing here. Look at these areas of ground. There are spots that show compression from long-term weight-bearing, like something heavy stood there for ages. But there's absolutely no archaeological evidence of human structures or regular human activity in these exact locations. Something was there, Elena. Something was watching the islanders as they built their statues over generations. Elena felt her skin begin to prickle with unease. Show me Nanmadol, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Pacific site materialized in the air between them. Massive stone structures rose from the water in the holographic display, an ancient city built on artificial islands. Chin highlighted several specific locations scattered throughout the ruins. Here, and here, he pointed. The same pattern repeats itself. Observation positions with no clear human purpose. No living quarters. No work areas. No religious significance that we can identify. Just places where something stood and watched. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was shaking slightly. Elena, these sites span more than 10,000 years of human history, from the earliest stone circles to relatively recent constructions. Whatever was watching, it didn't just observe us for a few years or even a few centuries. It watched for an incredibly long time. They worked through the entire night, fueled by coffee and growing dread. Chin had developed a computer algorithm to identify similar patterns at other archaeological sites around the world. The program searched through thousands of archaeological surveys, looking for the same telltale signs. Unexplained wear patterns, areas of ground compression without corresponding human artifacts, positions that seemed designed for observation rather than habitation or work. By the time the sun started to rise outside, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they found 73 distinct locations across every single continent. That included Antarctica, where research stations had discovered ancient observation points buried under the ice. All of them showed the same signs of prolonged, patient watching. This is impossible, Chin said, rubbing his tired eyes with the palms of his hands. Nothing could observe humanity continuously for 10,000 years. Nothing lives that long. No species we know could maintain that kind of surveillance. The Valkyrie do, Elena pointed out, pulling up another file on her screen. They live for millions of years. Maybe these walkers, these witnesses, whatever they are, maybe they do too. She opened a new file that she had been compiling over the past week. This one contained historical accounts from various cultures around the world, spanning thousands of years. She had spent days reading through old manuscripts, historical reports, and folklore looking for patterns. What she found were reports of mysterious strangers who appeared during significant moments in history, then vanished without explanation. There was a detailed account from ancient China about a man dressed in strange clothing who had warned an entire village about a flood the day before it happened. He spoke their language perfectly, knew details about their lives that no stranger should know, then disappeared before the waters came. The village survived because they listened to him. Another report came from the American Civil War. Multiple soldiers from both sides had written about a woman who appeared at the Battle of Gettysburg. She tended to wounded soldiers from both the Union and Confederate armies, speaking perfect English, perfect German, perfect whatever language the dying men needed to hear. Medical staff remembered her clearly because of her skill and compassion. But when the battle ended, she vanished completely. No one could find any record of who she was or where she came from. Ancient Roman texts described a mysterious figure who had long philosophical discussions with Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The emperor wrote about this person in detail in his private journals, describing conversations that shaped his thinking. But the stranger appeared in no other historical record. No one else ever mentioned meeting this person. Look at the descriptions, Elena said, highlighting specific passages from different accounts. This report from 1347 describes a man in Florence who warned people about the coming plague. This one from 1883 describes a woman in Krakatoa who helped evacuate villagers before the volcanic eruption. Different centuries, different continents, different cultures, but the descriptions share eerie similarities. They're always described as calm, unusually calm even in crisis situations. They're always knowledgeable about things they shouldn't know. They're always helpful in crucial moments, and they always disappear without any explanation afterward. Chen leaned forward, reading the accounts carefully. His scientific mind was fighting against the impossible conclusion, but the evidence kept piling up. You actually think these are your walkers? That these historical accounts are real? I think they're not mythology, Elena said firmly. I think they're eyewitness accounts of something real. Something that's been here, watching us and occasionally intervening, throughout our entire recorded history. A notification sound interrupted their conversation. It was a message from their research assistant, a brilliant young woman named Yuki Tanaka, who had been helping them review security footage and public records. The message was marked urgent in bright red letters. Elena opened the attached files with a growing sense of dread. Yuki had found something in their own recent documentation. During their trip to the Galactic Summit, she had taken hundreds of photographs of crowds and events, just standard documentation procedure. In one particular photo, taken during the opening ceremony, there was a man standing in the background. He wasn't doing anything unusual, just standing there. But he was clearly watching the human delegation with focused attention. Yuki had run this man's face through a reverse image search, checking it against historical databases from around the world. What she found was impossible. Completely impossible. The same face appeared in a grainy black and white photograph from 1940, showing a crowd in London during the Blitz. The exact same face appeared in a daguerreotype photograph from 1851 in San Francisco during the Gold Rush. The exact same face appeared in a detailed painting from 1789 in Paris, depicting a crowd watching the fall of the Bastille during the French Revolution. That's impossible, Chen whispered, staring at the images displayed side by side. That's the same person. The exact same face across almost 200 years of recorded history. Elena's phone suddenly rang, making them both jump. It was Yuki, and when Elena answered, she could hear the fear in the young woman's voice. Dr. Vasquez, I need to tell you something important. Yesterday, when we were at the airport coming back from a meeting with the European Science Council, I saw someone. A man. I didn't think anything of it at the time. People watching crowds at airports is normal. But after finding all these photos and running the facial recognition, I'm absolutely certain it was the same person. The same one from all these historical images going back centuries. Elena felt her blood run cold. Yuki, where are you right now? I'm in my apartment. I locked all the doors and windows. I know how crazy this sounds. Dr. Vasquez, I'm a scientist. I don't believe in ghosts or time travelers or whatever this might be. But I swear to you, I'm being watched right now. I can feel it. It's like there are eyes on me all the time. Stay there, Elena said firmly. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't leave. We're coming to you right now. She ended the call and stood up quickly, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. Chen was already packing his equipment into a bag, moving with urgent purpose. The evidence was mounting, piece by impossible piece, building into a picture that defied everything they thought they knew about reality. Something that had been on Earth for thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands. Something that looked perfectly human, but clearly was not. Something that watched humanity's every move, appearing at crucial moments throughout history, then fading back into the shadows like smoke. And now, after humanity had joined the galactic community and started asking dangerous questions, whatever had noticed them, it had noticed that they were finally noticing it. Chin stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. If these things are real, if they've really been here all along watching us, why reveal themselves now? Why take the risk of being discovered? Elena thought about the Valkyrie and their ancient fear. She thought about Elder Moraine's warning, the terror in his voice when he spoke about the walkers. Maybe they're not revealing themselves, she said slowly, the terrible realization forming as she spoke. Maybe we're finally advanced enough as a species to actually see them. After 10,000 years of being invisible, we finally developed the technology and the awareness to notice they're here. And then what happens? Chin asked quietly. Elena grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Maybe that's exactly what the Valkyrie are afraid of. Not that these walkers exist, but that we're finally ready to know they exist. And once we know, everything changes. The message arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning, pulling Elena from a restless sleep filled with uneasy dreams. Her phone buzzed on a nightstand, the screen glowing bright in the darkness of her bedroom. She grabbed it quickly, her heart already pounding before she even read the words. It was a simple text on her secure government channel, the kind that was encrypted and couldn't be traced. Just a set of coordinates pointing to somewhere in Antarctica, followed by a single sentence that made her blood run cold. If you want answers, come alone. Bring Dr. Chun. Tell no one else. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. She should report this immediately. Protocol absolutely demanded it. She should contact security, inform her superiors, arrange for a full team with proper protection. But something deep in her gut told her that whoever sent this message would vanish like smoke if she showed up with security forces or government officials trailing behind her. This wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. And it might be her only real chance to learn the truth about what had been hiding on Earth for thousands of years. She called Chin immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. He hadn't been sleeping either. "You got it too?" he asked. "Yeah," Elena replied. "This is a terrible idea." "I know," Chin said quietly. "I'm going anyway." "I know," Chin said again. "I'll meet you at the airfield in 2 hours." The flight to Antarctica took 14 long hours. They traveled in a small research plane, using Elena's diplomatic credentials to avoid too many questions from air traffic control. The pilot was someone they trusted, a former military man, who knew when not to ask about the details of a mission. As they flew south, Elena watched the world change below them. Cities gave way to farmland, then to ocean, then to the first glimpses of ice floating in dark water. The coordinates they'd been given led them to one of the most remote sections of the entire continent. This wasn't anywhere near the established research bases where scientists study climate and ice cores. This was the deep interior, the part of Antarctica that remained almost completely unexplored. The landscape below them was endless white, broken only by blue shadows cast by ridges of ice and the occasional dark outcrop of exposed rock jutting through the frozen surface. "There's nothing down there," Chin said, checking their instruments for the third time. No structures showing up on radar. No heat signatures. No radio signals. Nothing at all. Elena checked the coordinates again on her tablet, making sure they hadn't made some kind of mistake. The numbers were precise, marking a specific location about 2 kilometers ahead of their current position. "Land as close as you can," she told the pilot. The plane set them down on a flat ice field that stretched out in every direction like a frozen ocean. Elena and Chin bundled themselves into heavy thermal gear, multiple layers of insulation against the killing cold. When they opened the plane's door, the wind hit them like a physical blow. It cut through their clothing like invisible knives, and the cold was so intense it hurt to breathe. The sun hung low on the horizon, neither rising nor setting, just circling endlessly and casting everything in pale gold light that made the ice gleam. They walked for 20 minutes, following the GPS coordinates on their portable device. Each step was difficult in the deep snow, and the wind tried constantly to push them off course. Elena's face was numb despite her protective gear, and her fingers were starting to lose feeling. Just when she began to think they had been sent on a false trail, that this was all some kind of cruel joke, Chen grabbed her arm and pointed ahead. "There," he said, his voice muffled by his face mask. A dark shape was emerging from the ice ahead of them. It was angular and deliberate, clearly artificial. But this wasn't something ancient, buried under millennia of accumulated snow and ice. It looked like it had recently risen from beneath the surface, or perhaps like it had simply chosen to become visible after remaining hidden. The structure was made of material that looked somewhat like dark metal, but behaved strangely in the light. Instead of reflecting the sun's rays, it seemed to absorb them, drinking the light and giving nothing back. "That's not human construction," Chen whispered, stopping in his tracks. "And it's not like the alien architecture we saw at the summit either. I've studied their building styles. This is something else entirely." They approached slowly, cautiously, every survival instinct screaming at them to turn around and run back to the plane. But curiosity and the desperate need for answers pushed them forward. The entrance was just a simple opening in the side of the structure. There was no door, no lock, no barrier of any kind. Elena felt absolutely certain that this place had been waiting specifically for them, that it would not have appeared for anyone else who might have stumbled across these coordinates. Inside, the temperature changed immediately. It was comfortable, almost warm, a shocking contrast to the brutal cold outside. The walls glowed with soft white light that seemed to come from the material itself rather than from any visible light source. The architecture was minimal and functional, designed purely for purpose rather than beauty or decoration. There were no decorations, no artwork, no unnecessary features at all. They walked down a long corridor that seemed to extend far deeper into the ice than should have been physically possible given the structure's size from the outside. The geometry didn't make sense, but Elena had stopped expecting things to make sense days ago. At the end of the corridor, a large circular room opened up before them. The room's walls were covered in displays, showing images, millions upon millions of them, flickering past so quickly that it was impossible to see them clearly. But Elena caught glimpses as her eyes adjusted. She saw humans building the first cities, saw ancient armies clashing in forgotten wars, saw artists creating masterpieces, saw lovers embracing, saw children being born, saw old people dying peacefully in their beds. The entire history of humanity was playing across those walls in an endless, overwhelming stream of moments. In the exact center of the room stood a man. He looked completely, utterly ordinary. Average height, maybe 5'10". Average build, neither muscular nor thin. Dark hair that was starting to gray slightly at the temples. Brown eyes. He wore casual clothes that wouldn't look out of place in any city on earth. Dark pants, a simple shirt, comfortable shoes. He could have been a teacher at a local school, a businessman heading home from work, a neighbor you'd wave to while getting your mail, just another person you'd pass on the street, without giving a second thought. But his eyes were wrong. They were too deep, too knowing. When Elena looked into them, she felt like she was looking into vast, empty space between stars. These were eyes that had seen things no human had ever witnessed. Eyes that had watched galaxies collide, and stars explode, and civilizations rise and fall like leaves on autumn wind. "Ambassador Vasquez." "Dr. Chun," the man said. His voice was pleasant and completely unaccented, perfectly neutral in a way that somehow made it more unsettling. "Thank you for coming. You may call me David, though I should tell you that is not my true name. I do not have a true name in any language you would understand." Elena found her voice, though it shook slightly when she spoke. "What are you?" David smiled slightly, like a patient teacher with students who had asked exactly the right question. "We are the witnesses," he said simply. "We have walked among humanity since your species first learned to dream. We have watched you build and destroy, love and hate, reach for the stars and crawl through the mud. We have been present for all of it." "Why?" Chun demanded, anger and fear mixing in his voice. "Why watch us for so long? Why hide what you are?" David gestured at the walls, and the images began to slow down, focusing on specific moments. Elena saw Göbekli Tepe being constructed thousands of years before civilization was supposed to exist. She saw the massive stone heads of Easter Island being carved and raised. She saw countless other moments of human achievement and failure. And in each image, if you looked very carefully, you could see them. Figures standing in the background, barely visible, always watching, never interfering, never drawing attention to themselves, just watching with infinite patience. "We are old," David said quietly. "Older than the Valkyrie, older than most of the stars you can see in your night sky. We are not biological beings in the way you understand biology. We are consciousness itself, energy and thought-given form. We can inhabit biological vessels when we choose to, move between them like you might change clothes. We exist in ways your current science cannot yet measure or detect." He walked closer, and Elena had to resist the strong urge to step backward. "Millions of years ago, we spread across the galaxy, studying the civilizations that arose on different worlds. We learned their languages, observed their cultures, try to understand the fundamental nature of intelligent life itself. Most species we encountered were predictable. They followed logical patterns. They grew, they expanded, they optimized their societies, and then eventually they stagnated. They became stable and unchanging." David's expression changed, showing something that looked almost like wonder. "Then we found humanity. You were nothing special at first, just primitives, barely different from the other animals that shared your world. But you had something we had never encountered before in all our travels. You could imagine things that did not exist, and then somehow will them into being. You saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. You were irrational, unpredictable, gloriously chaotic in ways that fascinated us." "You're talking about creativity," Elena said, "about imagination." "We are talking about hope," David corrected gently. "The ability to believe in something better despite all evidence to the contrary. The ability to look at impossible odds and decide to try anyway. Other species have intelligence, Ambassador Vasquez. Many species have intelligence far greater than yours. But only humans have this specific quality, this absolute defiance of reality itself. It fascinated us completely. So we decided to stay and watch what you would do." Chen's face had gone pale. "The Valkyrie," he said. "Elder Moraine told us you watched them too. What happened?" David nodded slowly, and for the first time, something like regret crossed his face. "Yes, we observed the Valkyrie long ago when they were a younger species, and we made a terrible mistake. We revealed ourselves to them before they were ready. The knowledge that they were being observed, that beings older and more powerful than themselves were studying their every move, it broke something fundamental in their civilization. They became paranoid, consumed by doubt. They started questioning whether anything they did was truly their own choice, or if we were somehow manipulating them. It took them thousands of years to recover from the psychological damage. We learned from that mistake," David continued. "We learned that most species cannot handle the knowledge of our existence. So we stayed hidden among you. We have been more careful with humanity. So you've been hiding among us, manipulating us," Elena said, anger rising hot in her chest. "Using us like some kind of experiment." "No," David said firmly, and there was genuine conviction in his voice. "We observe. Occasionally, very rarely, we inspire. We sit with a dying soldier on a battlefield and give him comfort in his final moments. We warn a village about a coming disaster that we have calculated will occur. We whisper an idea to an artist or a scientist who is very close to an important breakthrough. But we do not control. We do not manipulate your choices. We simply watch humanity do what it does best, which is to constantly surprise us." "Why tell us now?" Chen asked. "After all this time hiding, why reveal yourselves?" David turned to look at the images on the wall again. "Because you joined the galactic community. Because the Valkyrie told you we exist, and you came looking for answers. Because you have finally reached a point in your development where you can handle the truth without breaking. And because we want you to understand something very important." He faced him again, his ancient eyes serious. "The galaxy fears humanity, Ambassador. Not because you are violent, though you certainly can be. Not because you are aggressive, though you are that too. They fear you because we chose you. Because the witnesses, beings that even the oldest civilizations cannot understand or predict, decided that humans were worth watching. They fear what that might mean." Elena felt the full weight of his words settle on her shoulders. "You're saying we're considered dangerous because of you. because you're interested in us. We are saying you are dangerous because of what you fundamentally are, David replied. The witnesses are simply drawn to that danger like moths drawn to flame. You are the species that looked at the impossible and made it real. You are the species that never accepts fate or destiny. That quality terrifies a galaxy built on order and predictability. He walked to the wall and placed his hand against the glowing surface. The images stopped moving, freezing on a picture of Earth seen from space, blue and green and white and beautiful. We can leave, David said quietly. If humanity asks us to go, we will go. We have stayed because we chose to stay. But we are not your masters. We are not your gods. We are your witnesses. The choice of what happens next belongs entirely to you. Elena looked at Chun, then back at David. 1,000 questions filled her mind, each one demanding answers. But only one question really mattered in this moment. If you leave, what happens to us? David smiled, but it was a sad smile. You continue being human. You surprise the galaxy. You change everything, with or without us. That is what you do. That is what you have always done. But without us watching, without us occasionally inspiring, you might take longer to achieve your full potential. Or you might achieve it faster, free from any influence we might have. We honestly do not know. That is exactly why we find you so endlessly fascinating. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps silent on the floor. Then he paused and turned back to face them one last time. You have 7 days to decide. Consult your governments, your people, your philosophers and scientists. Choose whether you want us to stay or go. Whatever you decide, we will honor completely. We are the witnesses and we serve no one. But we have come to genuinely respect humanity. We will let you choose your own path. David faded then. He didn't walk away or leave through a door. He simply ceased to be visible, as if he had been a hologram all along and someone had switched off the projector. Elena and Chen stood alone in the room, surrounded by frozen images of humanity's entire history, feeling the crushing weight of decision that would shape their species' future in ways they couldn't even begin to imagine. Outside the structure, the Antarctic wind continued to howl across endless ice. The sun circled the horizon in its endless loop, and somewhere in the frozen wasteland, ancient beings who were not human waited patiently for humanity's answer. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened just 18 hours after Elena and Chen returned from Antarctica. Elena had barely had time to shower and change clothes before she was standing in the massive circular chamber in Geneva, facing representatives from every nation on Earth. Their faces filled the enormous screens that wrapped around the walls, creating the impression of an amphitheater full of anxious, confused, and angry people. The mood in the chamber was tense enough to cut with a knife. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Elena could see it in every face, hear it in every whispered conversation happening between representatives. She had already delivered her full report 3 separate times to different committees, and still people struggled to accept what she was telling them. The truth was simply too big, too impossible to wrap their minds around. You're telling us that aliens have been living among us for thousands of years, the American representative said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. His face on the screen was red, and a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. That they've been watching us, influencing us, and we never knew. That everything we thought we knew about our own history might be a lie. They claim they don't influence, only observe, Elena corrected, try and keep her own voice calm and steady, and occasionally inspire. But yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. They've been here, walking among us, for at least 10,000 years, possibly much longer. How do we know they're telling the truth? The Chinese representative demanded, leaning forward in her chair. How do we know this isn't all manipulation? How do we know anything we've achieved is really ours? Maybe every invention, every piece of art, every scientific breakthrough was planted in our minds by these creatures. Dr. Chen stepped forward from where he'd been standing against the wall. He projected data into the center of the room, holographic charts and graphs floating in the air for everyone to see. Because the pattern is absolutely clear, he explained. We've analyzed thousands of historical records. The witnesses appear at crucial moments, yes, but they don't change outcomes. They don't prevent wars or stop disasters. They don't force innovations to happen. They simply watch, and sometimes they give a small nudge, a word of encouragement here, a warning there. But the choices, the actual decisions and actions, those were always ours. The evidence shows that clearly. The debate exploded from there and raged for hours. Representatives shouted over each other, arguments overlapping until a moderator had to bang the gavel repeatedly just to restore some semblance of order. Some representatives wanted to expel the witnesses immediately, to prove that humanity was truly independent and didn't need ancient aliens watching over them like children. Others argued passionately for keeping them, fearing that losing their presence after 10,000 years might somehow harm human development in ways they couldn't predict. A few even suggested trying to capture and study the witnesses, which Elena immediately dismissed as both completely impossible and incredibly foolish. You don't capture beings that can fade out of existence at will. The heated arguing was suddenly interrupted by an incoming transmission alert. The screens flickered and a priority message appeared. The Valkyrie called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council, specifically regarding Earth. Elena felt her stomach drop like a stone. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. She accepted the connection with shaking hands. Elder Moraine's luminescent form materialized in the center of the chamber, towering over everyone. His ancient face was grave, more serious than Elena had ever seen it. The galactic community has learned that Earth has made direct contact with the witnesses, he said, his voice echoing through the room. We demand immediate clarification of your intentions. Elena stepped forward, forcing herself to stand tall and meet his gaze. We have confirmed their presence on Earth. We are currently in the process of deciding how to proceed with this knowledge. The response was immediate and absolutely devastating. The screen split into dozens of sections as representatives from alien species across the galaxy appeared, their voices overlapping to the translator systems in a cacophony of demands and accusations. The word expulsion was repeated over and over, coming from multiple species. Several demanded that humanity be completely removed from the galactic community and all its benefits. Others called for Earth to be placed under strict quarantine, cut off entirely from all galactic trade routes and communication networks. You harbor a direct threat to galactic stability, declared a crystalline being called an Ixar, its voice chiming like breaking glass. The witnesses must be removed from your world immediately, or you must be isolated from the rest of civilized space. There's no third option. Elena felt anger flare hot in her chest. We didn't invite them, she said loudly, her voice cutting through the noise. They were here long before we even knew the galaxy existed, long before we built cities or invented writing. How can you possibly punish us for something we didn't choose? Something that happened before we were even a civilization? Elder Moraine raised one long, thin hand, and the chamber immediately fell silent. Every alien representative stopped talking at once, showing the kind of respect that came from dealing with a species millions of years old. You do not understand the true nature of the threat, Ambassador Vasquez, he said, and there was something almost like pity in his ancient voice. The witnesses are not simply neutral observers. They are a psychological weapon, whether they intend to be or not. When a species becomes aware that they are being watched by beings far more powerful and ancient than themselves, it fundamentally changes them. It creates deep doubt, paranoia, dependence. It destroys the natural, healthy development of civilizations. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his face flushed with emotion. Then why didn't it destroy us? He challenged. Humanity didn't know they existed until a few weeks ago. We developed completely naturally. We made our own choices, built our own civilization, create our own technology and art and culture. We're not broken. We're not damaged. We're fine. Not yet, Moraine said quietly, and the sadness in his voice was unmistakable. But now you know they exist. Now you will always wonder. Every thought you have, you'll question. Was that really mine or was it planted? Every inspiration, every creative breakthrough, every moment of insight, you'll doubt whether it came from within you or from them. This doubt will consume you slowly, like poison, just as it nearly consumed my people millions of years ago. The emergency session ended with a scheduled vote in 7 days. The same exact 7 days that humanity had been given to decide about the witnesses. The timing was clearly not coincidental. The galaxy was giving Earth a stark, brutal choice: reject the witnesses and remain part of the galactic community with all its benefits, or accept them and face complete isolation from the rest of intelligent space. Over the next 3 days, Elena barely slept at all. She worked around the clock, coordinating with scientists, philosophers, historians, psychologists, and leaders from across the entire planet. A global referendum was hastily organized, using technology that allowed every person on Earth to vote securely. It was the first truly worldwide vote in all of human history. The question was deceptively simple: should the witnesses stay or should they go? On the 4th day, Elena received an encrypted message from a completely unexpected source. It came through diplomatic channels marked for her eyes only. The message was from the Thrin, the young reptilian species whose representative had been so friendly at the summit. Ambassador Krell was requesting a private conversation. Elena accepted the call in her secure office, exhausted and desperate for any kind of good news. Krell's scale face appeared on her screen. His eyes were bright with curiosity and something that looked almost like excitement rather than the fear she'd seen in so many other aliens. "Ambassador Vasquez," Krell said, his translator clicking softly as it converted his words. "My species has been having intense discussions about your situation. I wanted to contact you privately because I think you should know something important. We are not like the Valkyrie. We do not fear the witnesses at all. In fact, we find them absolutely fascinating. That's a very unusual position to take," Elena said carefully, not sure where this was going. Krell made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "My people are only 10,000 years old as a spacefaring civilization. We are basically children compared to species like the Valkyrie. Perhaps that is exactly why we see the situation so differently. The ancient species, they are set in their ways. They fear change. They fear unpredictability. They fear anything that disrupts their carefully ordered universe. But we younger species, we understand that the galaxy needs chaos sometimes. It needs something unexpected to shake things up." He leaned closer to his camera, and Elena could see genuine excitement in his expression. "I will tell you a secret, Ambassador. There are many young species in the galaxy who are growing tired of the old rules, the old fears, the old ways of doing things. We have been talking among ourselves through private channels. If Earth is expelled from the galactic community, simply for harboring the witnesses, several of us are planning to leave the galactic community in protest. We would rather establish independent trade and cultural exchange with humanity and its mysterious guardians than continue bow to the Valkyrie's ancient paranoia." Elena felt hope stir in her chest for the first time in days. "You would actually risk that?" "Risk everything." "We would," Krell confirmed without hesitation, "because we see something that the old species refused to see. The witnesses chose Earth for a reason. They saw something in humanity worth watching for 10,000 years. And now that we have met your kind, Ambassador, we see it too. You are different. You're unpredictable. You're dangerous in the best possible way. The galaxy desperately needs that kind of energy. It needs to be reminded that the universe isn't supposed to be completely safe and ordered." After Krell signed off, Elena sat staring at her dark screen for a long time, thinking hard. The divide in the galaxy wasn't really just about the witnesses at all. It was about fundamental philosophy, about whether the universe should be ordered and predictable and safe, or whether it should be chaotic and free and full of possibility. Humanity had somehow become the living symbol of that philosophical divide, whether they wanted to be or not. On the 6th day, David appeared in Elena's office without warning. He didn't knock or announce himself or use the door. He was simply there, sitting calmly in the chair across from her desk, as if he had always been there, and she just hadn't noticed until that moment. "The vote is tomorrow," he said quietly. "Have you decided what you will recommend to your people?" Elena had been writing and rewriting her speech for hours, filling page after page with careful arguments and passionate appeals. But seeing David sitting there, looking so perfectly human and yet so utterly alien, she felt all her prepared words crumble into dust. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Not the philosophical answer about hope and creativity. The real reason. Why do you really stay?" David was silent for a very long moment, and for the first time since she'd met him, Elena saw a genuine, raw emotion cross his face. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight that made her chest ache. Because in all our existence, across millions of years and thousands of different civilizations spread across the entire galaxy, only humans have ever asked us to leave. Only humans have ever questioned whether they want us here. Only humans have ever demanded to know what gives us the right to watch them. Every single other species either feared us like the Valkyrie did, or they worshipped us like gods. You do neither. You simply ask, what gives you the right? That question, that defiance, that's why we stay. He stood slowly and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights below. That refusal to accept fate or authority without questioning it first, that absolute insistence on free will and choice, that is why we stay. Because watching you choose, again and again, to be brave when it would be so much easier to be afraid, that is the most beautiful thing we have ever witnessed in our entire existence. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. If we ask you to stay, the galaxy might turn against us. We could lose everything. Yes, David agreed simply. That is a real possibility. If we ask you to leave, we might lose something essential, something that has been quietly guiding us for our entire history. Perhaps, David said, turning to face her, or perhaps you'll discover that you never needed us at all, that everything you achieved was always completely and entirely yours. Which is it? Elena asked desperately. Did we need you, or didn't we? David smiled, and for just a moment, he looked genuinely, perfectly human. That is exactly the right question, Ambassador. The perfect question. And I have absolutely no idea what the answer is. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. You must choose based on faith, not knowledge. Based on hope, not certainty. Just like humans have always done throughout your entire history. He began to fade then, becoming transparent like morning mist, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and her half-written speech, and a choice that would echo through human history forever. Elena walked into the giant meeting hall where representatives from every corner of Earth had gathered. Outside, billions of people were glued to their screens, waiting to hear what she would say. The room fell silent as she stepped up to speak. A week ago, something impossible happened to me, she started, her voice clear and steady. I met someone who told me his name was David. But David isn't human. He's part of a group that has been living among us, watching us, for 10,000 years. You could hear people shifting in their seats. Some looked shocked, others skeptical. Elena continued. These beings, these witnesses as they call themselves, have been here the whole time. They've walked our streets, lived in our cities, and observed everything we've done. And now another alien species, the Valkyrie, are warning us that knowing about them will destroy our civilization. They say the knowledge will drive us mad with doubt and paranoia. She paused and looked around the room. But I don't believe that, and I'll tell you why. Humanity has always lived with a feeling of being watched. Our ancestors believed the gods were watching from the heavens. People have always felt their dead relatives watching over them. We've told stories about spirits and guardians for as long as we've been telling stories at all. The idea that something is observing us, judging us, caring about what we do, that's not new. It's been part of human consciousness since the beginning. Elena's voice grew stronger, more confident. These witnesses didn't create that feeling. They're just one possible answer to a question we've been asking ourselves forever. So no, I don't think this knowledge will break us. I think we can handle it because we've been preparing for it, in a way, for our entire history as a species. She took a deep breath before making her recommendation. I think we should let the witnesses stay, but not as hidden observers anymore. If they want to remain on Earth, they need to come out of the shadows completely. They need to live openly among us. They need to follow our laws, respect our customs, and play by our rules. No more secrets. No more hiding. If they're going to be part of our world, they need to actually be part of our world, not ghosts haunting it from the edges. Suddenly, a shimmering figure appeared in the center of the room. It was Elder Moraine, the Valkyrie leader, projecting herself across space to address the council directly. You do not understand what you are choosing, the ancient alien said, her voice filled with something that sounded like genuine concern. The doubt will consume you from within. You will question every interaction, every relationship. You will wonder if the person beside you is human or one of them. This uncertainty destroyed species far older and wiser than yours. Elena met the elder's gaze without flinching. With all due respect, Elder Moraine, I think you're projecting your own trauma onto us. What happened to your people was terrible, but we're not you. Humans have always lived with uncertainty. We question ourselves constantly. We doubt our leaders, our institutions, even our own memories and perceptions. We build entire philosophies around embracing the unknown. These witnesses are just one more mystery in a universe already full of them. We'll adapt because that's what we do. Another figure materialized next to the Valkyrie elder. It was David, representing the witnesses. We accept your terms, he said simply. No more hiding. We will register with your governments. We will live openly and honestly among you. We will follow your laws and customs. We will become visible members of your society. Chun, the head of the Earth Council, leaned forward. How many of you are there? How many witnesses are currently on Earth? Approximately 300, David answered. Some have been here for thousands of years. Others are much younger. But all of us will reveal ourselves. The Valkyrie delegation erupted in protest, their holographic representatives flickering with agitation. But then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Krell of the Thren, another alien species, spoke up. The Thren support Earth's decision. We believe transparency is preferable to secrecy. One by one, other younger species in the galactic community voiced their support. It became clear that there had been tension brewing for centuries, with newer civilizations chafing under the old rules imposed by ancient species like the Valkyrie. Earth's bold choice had given them permission to challenge the established order. The chamber buzzed with heated debate for hours. Finally, Elder Moraine spoke again, and this time her voice carried a note of resignation. The galaxy is changing. Perhaps it has needed a change for a long time. The Valkyrie will not oppose Earth membership in the galactic community, but we hope you understand the weight of what you have chosen. 3 months passed. The world had changed, but not in the dramatic ways many had feared. The 317 witnesses had all come forward as promised. They had registered with various governments, submitted to interviews, and agreed to serve as cultural liaisons between humanity and their kind. Some had revealed they'd been famous historical figures. Others had lived quiet, unremarkable lives for centuries. Elena found herself sitting in a small cafe in Geneva on a crisp autumn afternoon. Across from her sat David, carefully holding 2 cups of coffee he'd just brought from the counter. It was a strangely ordinary scene given everything that had happened. How do you really feel about all this? Elena asked, being forced into the open after hiding for so long. David considered the question, taking a slow sip of his coffee. Honestly, relieved. Hiding was necessary for a very long time, but it was also incredibly lonely. We could observe you, but we couldn't truly connect with you. Now we can be honest about what we are. Now we can have real conversations like this one. A woman walked past their table, and Elena recognized her face from a photograph she'd seen in a history book. The woman caught Elena staring and gave a small, knowing nod before continuing on her way. Just another witness going about her day in the open now. How many of you are in this cafe right now? Elena couldn't help asking. David smiled. Does it really matter? Think about it. When you walk down any street, you don't know who among the people you pass is kind or cruel, honest or deceptive, brilliant or foolish. Every human you meet is a mystery in their own way. We're simply one more variety of unknown among billions. We're just more obvious about being unknowable. Elena found herself laughing. He was absolutely right. Humans had always been mysteries to each other. The witnesses just made that mysterious quality more literal. David stood to leave, placing his empty cup on the table. Thank you, Ambassador, for choosing truth over comfortable lies, for reminding the galaxy what courage actually looks like. Will I see you again? Elena asked. Almost certainly. We're neighbors now. And something tells me humanity has many more surprises ahead. I wouldn't want to miss them. Elena watched him walk away and disappear into the crowd of people moving along the street outside. Life continued exactly as it always had. People rushed to work. Couples held hands. Children laughed and played. The only difference was that now humanity knew with certainty that they weren't alone, that something ancient and strange walked among them. And they had responded to this revelation not with fear or worship, but by making these ancient beings register with the authorities, follow traffic laws, and pay their taxes like everyone else. It was, Elena thought with a quiet smile, the most perfectly human solution imaginable. When faced with the incomprehensible, humanity had simply made it comprehensible by forcing it to deal with bureaucracy. Somewhere far above, in meeting halls scattered across distant planets, the galactic community continued debating what Earth's choice meant for the future. But here, in this small cafe, in this ordinary moment, Elena simply watched her fellow humans live their lives. They knew something inhuman walked among them now, and they decided that knowledge was neither terrifying nor particularly comforting. It was simply one more strange fact about a strange universe. The witnesses would continue watching humanity, as they always had, but now they'd do it openly, and humanity would watch them right back with the same curiosity and skepticism they applied to everything else. And from that mutual observation, something entirely new would emerge, something that had never existed before in all the galaxy's long history, something unmistakably, undeniably impossibly human.